Since the 1960s, Pennsylvania has been a national leader in establishing mining laws and regulations to ensure reclamation occurs after active mining is completed. During the same time, Pennsylvania began an aggressive cleanup of abandoned mine sites through a cooperative effort by DEP and private citizen groups. This is the story of the Mill Creek Watershed restoration in northwestern Pennsylvania.
Pete Dalby, past member of the faculty at Clarion University in the biology department.
I'm Janie French with Headwaters Charitable Trust and the executive director for the trust.
Hi, my name's Terry Morrow. I also was a faculty member at Clarion University when this all began. I am Jim Reed. I'm a new member of the MCC.
Since the early 1990s, the Mill Creek Coalition, or MCC, and their various supporting partners have been working to address sources of acid mine drainage, or AMD. This 60 square mile Mill Creek watershed in northwest PA has a long history of mining and related AMD pollution, leaving the Mill Creek essentially lifeless. Many of the passive treatment systems developed by MCC and their partners were revolutionary and to this day serve as a guide for other cleanup efforts worldwide.
The coalition, I think, really started with a couple of, its affiliation, quite frankly, in my mind, with Clarion University. The Pete Dalby, who has been the longtime president of the coalition, was a professor. Terry Morrow was a professor. There was another gentleman very involved with the coalition, Jack Williams, that was a professor at Clarion. And they engaged some students and also a lot of the natural resource nonprofits that became members of the coalition. So I believe that timing was right in that in the 90s, there was a big push to begin addressing abandoned mine drainage issues. The state had a program to start watershed groups. However, the coalition was already started by then, but that was the Department of Environmental Protection's way of actually getting citizen volunteers to address water quality issues with a particular emphasis on abandoned mine drainage.
The 70s and the 1980s, and there was a lot of strip mining occurring throughout this particular area of Clarion and Jefferson counties. But changes were occurring in regulations at both the state and the federal level. And it was a time of change. And a lot of the streams, including the Clarion River, were being negatively affected by past coal mining operations. And we started to look at ways that some of this could be addressed.
My affiliation with the Mill Creek Coalition goes back to the 90s, believe it or not. I worked with the coalition through Headwaters starting in 1990. And just as the coalition was getting formed. My role with the coalition was to actually secure funding, to secure property rights to be able to build these treatment systems, and also to look at different opportunities through different funding sources for the development of these treatment systems.
And at that time, we had a biology organization, a biology club, that we could involve them in various kinds of activities and field kind of activities. And we also had several individuals that were notable at the very beginning, Douglas Kepler and Eric McCleary, excuse me. Sorry there, Eric. And they became noticeably involved in those kind of activities and shared their thoughts and experiences. And before graduating, both of them had jobs at a local environmental engineering firm known as EADS, E-A-D-S, and would come back and explain what they'd seen here and there and different experiences and so on. And we got the biology club involved in seeing some of these sites. And finally, we decided amongst ourselves and other folks, I'm involved in a federation of sportsmen at the state and local levels, and Terry is heavily involved in Trout Unlimited, and we have other members of the department and in the community that were very interested. And so in October of 1990, we put together a conference at Clarion University to address the issue and seeing if we could determine within our area of Clarion and Jefferson counties being together here that could we address the whole watershed. And so the discussion was fairly open-ended, and we had all sorts of invitees from the conservation districts from both counties, the natural resource conservation folks that were stationed locally. We had the Army Corps of Engineers out of Pittsburgh. We had a number of different organizations and agencies that were involved, including some that dealt as 501c3 organizations that were involved in environmental issues. And at the end of that, and the local DEP people from the Knox office, which was in Clarion here, that all participated, and it was an excellent meeting. And from that meeting, we determined that Mill Creek had some obvious advantages that we thought that we could address.
We're standing on Mill Creek at the site of our first project, which is known as the Howe Bridge. This was our first attempt, and honestly we didn't really know too much about acid mine treatment at the time, but there were some ideas that our friends Doug and Eric had come up with for creating a treatment system. And we were able to cobble together some money from various sources, a small amount of money. $10,000 came from Trout Unlimited, and some other money came from the DEP. And we included in this project the Pennsylvania National Guard group out of Punxsutawney, which was a construction battalion that had bulldozers and other heavy equipment. In addition, a local contractor, Simpson Excavating, was involved in donating their equipment and time, operator time. So through all these various avenues, we were able to get the first system done. And the Howe Bridge was constructed in 1991 in the fall, and it involved some technology that was relatively new, of running water through, acid mine water through limestone, and it worked beautifully. It was a miracle that it did work now looking back, but it worked wonderfully, and eventually became well known literally around the world as a pioneer project for treating acid mine drainage. So we had all these various volunteers and collaborators that made this happen. And from this then grew the entire Mill Creek Coalition effort, which has covered the entire watershed to this date. After this Howe Bridge site was constructed, we identified a number of other sites in Little Mill Creek that were contributing to the pollution load. And we began to try to find funding to correct those sites. We continued to utilize the National Guard for another year. We were now enlisting the Headwaters Charitable Trust that was involved with handling money. We also found some other grant money through DEP and other sources that they handled. So we were able to scale up our efforts and build some larger sites, still involving the use of limestone buried in what we call an anoxic limestone drain. This proved to work very well for certain kinds of acid mine water, like found here and in some of the other sites. We learned, unfortunately, to our dismay, that if the water had certain characteristics, such as very low pH and aluminum, the anoxic limestone drains did not work, and they immediately or very quickly clogged up. And so new technology was considered, again, from the Eads Group and a later company called Damariscotta that Doug and Eric formed, to treat that kind of water using what became known as vertical flow wetlands, or SAPs. And these could handle water that had low pH and aluminum, and involved using mushroom compost layered over limestone, under which were pipes that collected the water. And the bacteria in the mushroom compost produced alkalinity, and the compost captured the aluminum, and that prevented the systems from clogging. And these SAPs eventually did clog, but they would last for 5 to 10 years. And so an approach was developed to treat that kind of acid mine water. So both major kinds of acid mine water can be treated using these two technologies. And all of our systems throughout the watershed involve one or another or both of these technologies. So from that point on, we continued to pick up sites and find funding, and eventually Growing Greener was passed by the Pennsylvania legislature, signed by Governor Tom Ridge, and the Growing Greener program allowed for the Headwaters on our behalf to apply for grant money to construct systems, and we continued on and on through the various areas of the watershed, creating these systems. At this point, we were past using volunteers primarily, and National Guard eventually was unable to help us any longer. So we became more conventional and hired contractors to build the systems. The designers of the system, other people became involved beside Damariscotta. Robert Hedden, Bob Hedden, formed a company called Hedden Environmental. Bob was an employee of the Bureau of Mines in Pittsburgh. He and I worked together on research, actually, on Howe Bridge, and he later left the Bureau and became a consultant that has his own company called Hedden Environmental, and he's designed a number of our systems. Another person, John Dietz, was a Clarion grad who later got his PhD at Penn State and now has done a lot of the design, working for various companies over the years. And so this new level of expertise was developing through this time. Many other watershed groups were formed and began using the same technologies, and some same consultants and some other consultants. And in fact, dozens and dozens of these groups formed over the state. This is the Smale Orcott, or REM site. This was mined prior to 1977, so nobody was responsible for the discharges. We originally, in the mid-90s, built a very massive passive treatment system here, and it lasted about 5 years, and it began to fail. So subsequent to that, the DEP came in and built what is known as an active treatment system. This is different from the passive systems in other areas of the watershed. The strategy here is to actively add limestone to the discharges and mix them in a large tank. It speeds up the reactions, and the sediment falls out very quickly. The sludge, which contains all the metals and the acid from the discharge. There are two discharges here. and they are collected in a pipe, each of them, and they're carried to the building you see behind me. And in that behind that building is a large steel mixing tank. In the large upright tank is what we call lime slurry. It's fine limestone that is kept in solution. There's a mixer in that tank, also heaters to keep it from freezing in the wintertime. It's metered out into this mixing tank where the discharges are treated, and it flows through a series of ponds. Right now we're using 3 ponds. In the original passive design, there were 9 ponds in the system, so they're still here and had provided a very good framework for the active treatment system, and have created a very efficient active system. The sludge falls out in pretty much the first pond and goes to a second pond, which is a clarifying pond, and behind me you can see a third pond which now actually has fish in it. This water was some of the worst water in the entire watershed and did a lot of damage to Little Mill Creek. Today, with this active treatment system, the water we're discharging is pH 7.2. 99% of the metals are removed, and the Little Mill Creek has benefited greatly from it. So we have a mixture of the the passive systems and this active system. The downside to this is that it creates a lot of sludge. In the passive systems, the sludge precipitates as the orange precipitate in the settling ponds, which have to be cleaned out maybe every decade or 2. Here the sludge is very obvious and copious, so there's an active process to dry the sludge, eventually recover it, and it's used for land application. It contains a lot of lime, and it's very, very good for treating particularly acid mine spoils. The Game Commission uses a lot of it, and when you put it on, you get gigantic grass growth, and it's a very good material. There's 2 ways that they collect it: in open pits, and the pit you see has been cleaned out recently. There's very little sludge left in it. Or it can be collected in these large geotextile bags, and they're used in the summertime, and the sludge dewaters through the bag, and the solids remain behind in the bag. Eventually these bags are slid open and the material is removed and again placed on land application. So this material does not have to go to a landfill. It's used for positive purposes to improve the environment around us. This system is very efficient, but active systems are also expensive. The annual operating costs here are in excess of $50,000, which is funded from DEP. The other thing is that these must be maintained constantly. There's a contractor that does a wonderful job here maintaining the system and keeping the sludge out of here. And it's a long-term commitment. So this is going to have to be done for at least 20 or 30, 40, 50 more years in order to keep Little Mill Creek in a good state. I've constructed probably 20 different passive treatment systems. Additionally, new technology has come into play, which we talked about on this video at the REM site, which involves active treatment of acid mine drainage utilizing lime slurry. This is proven to be, although expensive, the sort of the ultimate solution to treating very seriously polluted sites. Passive treatment still remains as a good method in our arsenal against smaller flow sites with water that is less polluted. One thing I would like to note, and we've been doing some research on this for years now, that these seeps get better over time, and what we have discovered in our work, and we just recently presented this at the Coldwater Conference, that typically these seeps improve in their quality of the amount of minerals and the pH at a rate of about 1 to 2% a year. So that means over, theoretically, 100 years, these seeps should actually fix themselves, which means for watershed groups like ourselves that the sites that we build are being less stressed by the pollution load than with every passing year. And so we see a point in the future where eventually the streams should clean themselves up, or at least the seeps should, and with minimal help from treatment systems. This is a long way in the future, but it's something to actually look forward to.
They meet monthly, and I don't think that they've really ever canceled a meeting since 1990, which is a testament to how dedicated this group is. And what's really significant with the efforts that the coalition has achieved is that they're now down to the last treatment site, to where the full Mill Creek corridor will be improved from abandoned mine drainage, which is pretty impressive. It's one of the very few watersheds that can totally be restored, and that is really significant.
I recently retired, and they asked me to join, and it was an instant yes, given the magnitude of the work that I knew they had done. And this one's a little bit personal in that our first ever house, where my wife and I met up here at Clarion University back in the 80s, ended up being in a little town called Fisher, which is just above the Mill Creek Watershed. And we had our 2 kids in that area, and all things outdoor related occurred in that Mill Creek Valley. So it was a really cool thing to take a hike in that Mill Creek, the upper Mill Creek watershed, where when we're taking a hike, you look into the creek, you see a nice hole, and you're thinking, boy, I wonder what kind of trout might be in that hole. And conversely, we would take a hike in an otherwise beautiful valley on the lower section of that watershed, and you knew all along that that section of the stream was dead. And it just a different mindset on a typical hike. So, but the Mill Creek Valley, in how big of a contiguous tract of ground it is, really has something to offer this region. And if we can get that last stretch of 7 miles all the way down to the Clarion River, that's a pretty big deal. It really is. And with the new technology and the efforts leading up to this, I'm talking 20 years plus of efforts by the elder statesmen of the group. It's really impressive to see the body of work that they've laid out. So if we can take that torch and get this final stretch cleaned up, that's important to us, to this region, and it's not too often that you have an opportunity to have that much of an impact on something that's going to be multi-generational. So I can honestly see maybe me as an old grandpa taking a grandkid down there and fishing, where right now that's not possible. So it is truly a, how do I want to say it, aquatic ecosystem is just screaming to happen, and we can bring that to life, and just need a little bit of consistent help with some volunteer work and the powers to be to keep it rolling and to keep momentum. And all ages, we're talking young students, grade school students on up through college students, and then retired folks like me, and even guys that are ready to turn over the torch. But to have that opportunity to have that kind of impact is really a good thing that a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So yeah, I was all in when they asked me to join.
We also have another site that we refer to as the Douglas Jones site that will probably treat water in stream at that particular site. And it's going to be an active treatment design. And we're working forward on that particular one. To see things at this particular point in time after 30-some years, but it's enjoyable when we talk to visitors that are just down with their kids, messing around in the water as children do, having picnics or bird walking, or actually trout fisher people that are doing their particular thing. And as we mentioned before, the landowners, our hats are off to them for allowing these processes to go on, where sometimes we're using an acre or two of their land to do this. And we're just pleased with what we've been able to do here in conjunction with both Clarion and Jefferson counties. So it's been a great cooperative effort.
One of the main lifelines to any community is the quality and quantity of its water. Mill Creek is the largest tributary in Clarion County that feeds the Clarion River, a river that has portions designated as a National Wild and Scenic River. The Clarion provides the region with countless outdoor-related amenities and recreation, from boating to fishing, as well as swimming and hiking. The intake for the municipal water of the Clarion area also occurs downriver from the Mill Creek-Clarion River confluence. There is also a significant positive economic impact to the local and regional communities. In short, this watershed has a tremendous impact on a local and regional basis. The 30-year effort and results is nothing short of miraculous. What was essentially a 20-mile stretch of dead stream 35 years ago now has 15 trout stocking points and will be expanded once the final 5-mile stretch is restored. If anyone or group wants to be part of this incredible restoration story, please contact the Clarion or Jefferson County Conservation Districts and/or the Mill Creek Coalition.